In this video, I'd like to show you how I changed the passenger side motor mounts in a 2004 Camry. Specifically, the 4-cylinder engine. The part number of the top mount is 3400312212. Access to the bottom mount by removing the passenger side front tire. And you'll see the part number for this is going to be 2010-428329. Why did I change the mounts? I noticed the car was pulling a little bit as I was accelerating. So I watched the mounts as I power braked it. You can see how much they're moving, and they're moving that front tire quite a bit. To do this job, I had to buy a whole new set of tools, specifically impact-rated tools, because I needed an impact driver to remove the bolts. Yeah, that stuff wasn't coming off with regular tools. Specific sizes used were 21mm for the tire, 14mm for the top mount, 10mm to remove a sidewall panel behind the tire, as well as a hose bracket, 19mm for the top nut on the bottom motor mount, and 17mm for the bottom bolts. You'll also need a torque wrench capable of going up to 76 foot-pounds. Okay, enough setup, let's get started. The top mount is really easy to get to, but not really easy to break loose. The fix? Get yourself an impact driver with a 14mm socket. As a matter of fact, everything on this mount is 14mm. This shows the hazards of setting a camera on a motor that you're pounding on. While pulling the bolts out, please note that the two bolts that go into the motor are shorter than the one that mounts it to the car frame. You'll probably want to put them back in those locations. There's also one really long bolt that holds the motor mount into this bracket. Again, 14mm. Hang on to these disc things, you'll be putting them back on the new part. Speaking of new part, here's what they look like. New on top, old on the bottom. A closer look at the bottom one shows the rubber is actually broken, which may explain why this engine is moving so much. Throw those two disc things onto the new part, and then reinstall it onto the mounting bracket. While reinstalling, remember the two short bolts go into the motor, the long bolt goes into the frame. Since I have to jack this engine up about 2 inches to change the bottom mount, I actually went back and removed these two motor mount bolts. That should prevent any damage while the engine's moving upward. Don't forget to mark it so you'll remember that part's not fully installed yet. Let's move on to the bottom motor mount. Remove the front passenger side tire. Using a 10mm socket, remove this little panel so you can gain access. Pop off these two covers on the bottom of the frame. This is how you're going to gain access to the bottom mounting bolts. Since the new part looked a little larger than the original, I did a little quick fit check. It should work. They must have done a redesign on this part. There's absolutely no way to get your impact driver on that top 19mm mounting nut. Luckily, I had tried and true, a really long pipe. Leverage is my friend here. However, you'll have no trouble using the impact driver on the 3 bottom mounting nuts. You'll use a 17mm socket. Don't make this new guy mistake like I did. Make sure you hold that nut into place until the impact driver stops spinning, otherwise it's going to wind up in the frame somewhere. I'll worry about this spilt milk after I get that mount out. I use a piece of wood to protect the oil pan, then I use a hydraulic jack to gently start lifting that engine. Remember, the top motor mount is loose. The goal here is to get it high enough to clear that threaded stud on the top of the mount. It turned out to be about 2 inches up. Okay, it's clear. Now let's move on to the next problem that I just discovered. You'll find it right back here. This hose is going to have to be moved if I want to get this mount out. Luckily, that's pretty easy. Grab your 10mm socket and remove the one mounting bolt that's holding the bracket that holds the hose. Okay, now what's the problem? That would be hydraulic jack creep. Lift it back up a little bit. Look at that. When you pretend you know what you're doing, look how easy it is. At this point, you have access to the holes in the top of the frame. I blew compressed air in through the holes to find that missing nut. Let's put the new part in. The top threaded mounting stud is not installed when you get the part. Feed it through the engine mounting bracket, then start screwing it into the engine mount itself. After you reach the limit of finger tight, break out a pair of vice grips. The middle part of this mounting stud isn't actually threaded, so it makes it easy to grab it with the vice grips. Take it all the way down until the bottom threads are completely installed. At this point, I put that hose mounting bracket back in, so I don't forget it. Keeping your fingers clear of anything that's moving, slowly lower the engine back down onto the mount. Get your top 19mm nut started. And start your 3 bottom 17mm nuts. I got all my torque values off strangers on the internet, and they said this is supposed to be torqued to 47 foot-pounds. Once again, I don't have tools that will allow me to do that. So, my workaround? I torque the 3 bottom ones to 47 foot-pounds and get a feel for how much pressure is required. Then I go back up to the top one and I try to put about the same amount of pressure on up there. Reinstall that little access panel. And since you have it off, inspect your tire before you put it back on. Then put it on. We'll be using a 21mm socket to 76 foot-pounds. We can drop the car back down. Then finish reinstalling the top motor mount. So since the engine shifted a little bit with the new motor mount on bottom, I'm going to start out fresh on this install. Remove the frame mount bolt. Then install the 2 engine mount bolts. Then push back a little on the engine to line it up and install the frame mount bolt again. We're going to go with 64 foot-pounds on these mounting bolts. I couldn't find a torque anywhere for this particular bolt, so we're going to go with good and tight.
Put it in gear.
Doing some test power braking of the new engine
braking.
mounts. I see it's still moving, but I can't tell if it's the same amount or less.
Let off. More. Back
I guess
up.
what really counts is
More.
how much is it moving that front tire, so I'll head down below. Here's video of before and after changing the engine mounts. It looks like after is a little bit less movement. but the bottom engine mount, it's clearly a lot less movement than it used to be. And now I don't actually feel any pulling when I accelerate, so I think I fixed this problem. Well, thanks for watching.